Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a reality that honestly sounds like science fiction, humans engineering a way to wipe an entire desert off the map. When we think about environmental crises, we usually think of things that are completely out of our control. But what if we could physically engineer an ecosystem back to life on a literal continental scale?
So, can a desert actually be erased? Let's kick things off by challenging an assumption that most of us just accept as absolute truth. We tend to think that deserts only grow, right? That they're these unstoppable forces of nature that just relentlessly swallow up towns and farmland. But what if that's not a permanent rule? What if human ingenuity could actually hit the brakes and reverse that entire process?
To figure out how this was done, we first have to meet our villain. Imagine a massive, looming threat, less than 70 kilometers from your capital city. For Beijing, this was the Gobi Desert. And it wasn't just sitting there. It was moving, like a slow, crushing ocean of yellow dust, advancing year after year and just devouring fertile farmland. When fierce winds ripped across those dry plains, they churned up massive, terrifying sandstorms. Locals actually gave it a legendary name, the Yellow Dragon. When the Yellow Dragon struck Beijing, the impacts were straight up apocalyptic. The sky would turn this dark, terrifying orange. It would literally become night during the day. They had to turn the streetlights on at noon. We're talking canceled flights, closed schools, and hospitals completely overwhelmed with people struggling to breathe because of the fine dust. This wasn't just a minor nuisance, it caused billions of dollars in economic damage every single year. And the scariest part of all, giant sand dunes were creeping several kilometers closer to the city annually. It became painfully clear that building a traditional concrete wall or just shoveling sand wasn't going to do a thing against a force this devastating.
Section 1. Building the Great Green Wall.
To fight a threat this massive, they needed a totally revolutionary idea. And what's truly staggering here is the unprecedented timeline. Back in 1978, China launched the 3 North Shelter Forest program. But get this, the target completion date is 2050. That is a 73-year master plan. This wasn't some quick PR stunt meant to last a single political cycle. It was a deep, intergenerational commitment to build a living green fortress. And that same level of ambition actually inspired 11 African nations to join forces decades later, in 2007, to start their own massive project.
4,500. That represents the total kilometers of trees stretching across 700 counties in northern China. To pull a logistical miracle like this off, the government had to call upon the entire nation. It required an absolute army of millions of local farmers, young students, and soldiers. They all armed themselves with shovels and saplings and marched straight toward the harsh desert edges. It was, quite literally, a massive declaration of war against the sand.
Section 2. The Straw Checkerboard Hack.
But here's the catch. Before those millions of people could plant anything, they had to solve a massive scientific problem. It's a brutal engineering dilemma. If you just take a young tree and stick it in an active moving sand dune, the wind is going to either rip it straight out of the ground in a few hours or bury it under meters of heavy dust. You simply cannot grow a forest on a shifting wave of sand. So how in the world do you freeze it?
Well, the solution was surprisingly low-tech. No fancy chemicals here, just basic agricultural waste. Workers took bundles of ordinary wheat and rice straw and manually pushed them into the loose sand using simple shovels. They created this exact 1-by-1 meter grid pattern all across the dunes. And what this does is pure aerodynamic genius. It dramatically breaks the wind speed right at ground level, so the air can no longer pick up those heavy sand grains. Once the sand stops moving, rainwater stops evaporating instantly, which allows a natural biological crust to form inside those quiet little straw squares. They literally hacked physics using straw.
With the dunes successfully frozen, the green assault officially began. Millions of everyday citizens, school classes, and families came out to volunteer. But the scientists had to play it smart too. They selected tough, drought-resistant species, like poplars and desert willows, that hardly need any water to survive. From there, the operation scaled up in a huge way. They brought in aircraft and AI drones to drop millions of nutrient-coated seed capsules into the hardest-to-reach areas. They even rolled out automated desert planting vehicles that could dig a precise trench, drop a sapling, and water it in one fluid motion. And the results? Honestly, they are staggering. The Mu'uz Desert, which used to be the main sandy gateway pushing all that terrifying dust straight toward Beijing, is now 93% restored. Just let that sink in for a second. 93%.
A deadly dust zone that used to swallow entire fortress cities is now a massive agricultural powerhouse, pumping out millions of tons of apples and potatoes. People who had fled as dust refugees actually came back home to cultivate this rich, profitable land.
Section 3. Africa's 8,000-kilometer shield.
Meanwhile, across the ocean, another giant continent was facing an even bigger nightmare. 8,000. That's how many kilometers the African Union aimed to cover to grow their own living green shield. The Sahara, the largest hot desert on Earth, was relentlessly pushing southward into the dry Sahel region. So totally inspired by the success over in Asia, 11 African nations joined forces to build a continuous wall of trees stretching all the way from Senegal on the Atlantic coast straight across to Djibouti near the Red Sea.
Now, tackling a climate crisis means you have to use tools that fit your local reality. China had massive funding, heavy machinery, and AI drones. Africa, on the other hand, faced a brutally difficult environment with extreme heat, incredibly scarce water, and a lot less funding. So they leaned heavily on local frontline defenders. African farmers revived these brilliant traditional techniques like digging smart, crescent-shaped pits in the hard soil to catch whatever rare rainwater fell. They planted resilient native acacia trees that naturally fix vital nutrients right back into the earth. This community-driven resilience didn't just stop the sand, it provided green jobs, reduced poverty, and became an absolute lifesaver for millions of people in the Sahel.
Section 4. The Sahara-Amazon Connection.
Okay, now that we've seen these incredible triumphs of human engineering, it really begs a provocative question and maybe a huge paradigm shift. If turning sand into green forests is actually possible, should humanity eventually try to erase all the deserts on Earth? I mean, is the ultimate goal a completely green globe?
Well, get ready for a mind-blowing scientific plot twist. It turns out Sahara dust actually flies all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to fertilize the Amazon rainforest. Yeah, every single year, strong winds pick up millions of tons of nutrient-rich dust from the Sahara, carry it thousands of miles over the ocean, and drop it right over South America. Without the Sahara Desert, the lush green Amazon rainforest wouldn't have the vital natural fertilizer it needs to survive.
And that brings us to a really vital distinction we have to make. We must separate natural deserts from forced desertification. You see, natural deserts aren't empty, useless dead zones. They are vital ecosystems that actually balance the global climate by reflecting sunlight back into space and keeping the whole planet from overheating. If we just erased them, we disrupt global weather systems entirely. Our fight is strictly against forced desertification, those aggressively expanding sand dunes caused by human climate damage that bury farmlands and threaten communities.
If there's one thing I want you to walk away with from this explainer, it's this core thesis right here. The real goal of green engineering is not to eliminate natural deserts entirely, but to stop forced desertification. It's all about protecting our vulnerable borders without throwing off the ancient natural ecosystems that keep our planet perfectly balanced.
We've seen today that humanity actually possesses the astonishing power to repair the damage we've done to our planet. By combining low-tech physics hacks with high-tech AI, local resilience, and a deep respect for natural balance, we literally stopped a moving ocean of sand. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. With smart science and a real respect for nature, what other ecological disasters can humanity reverse? If we can erase the yellow dragon, what else are we capable of healing? Keep that in mind as you look at the world around you. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and always keep asking the big questions.